Good afternoon, everybody, and good evening or good morning, wherever you are. And I am Vijay John Britto. I am a customer engineer at Google Cloud. Uh, I'm here to talk about GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine, the best practices, the new capabilities, and where does it fit in the Kubernetes and containers ecosystem. Again, one of the challenge in enterprise today is, we all know the Kubernetes is really cool. And then containers helps us in isolation, introspection, portability, ease of sharing, reusability. There are much more. That's what the containers are useful for. And then Kubernetes helps in scaling and deploying the containers. But even then, the the biggest struggle in the top of the mind of the IT leaders are how do we manage and adopt this Kubernetes? How do we manage network and connectivity? How do we deploy the right size of the apps on the right resources? How do we maintain updates? How do we manage logging, monitoring? And on top of that, security, access control, there are much more to go. All this are daunting tasks for the IT leaders, technical managers, and developers. So that's where the managed Kubernetes comes in handy. So just to give a overview of the timeline on Google, what's happening in Google. So Kubernetes was born in Google, and containers has been used in Google since early 2000s. Google deploy about 5 billion containers in a span of 1 week um, for their Google search, YouTube, and other products. So the containers and Kubernetes becomes kind of open source in early 2010s, and then Kubernetes was born in Google in 2014, and then GKE was introduced in 2015, and GKE on-premise, where we can extend the Kubernetes to the on-premise and other clouds. In 2019, in Cloud Next, Anthos, the multi-cloud platform for Kubernetes, was introduced. So there it is. This keep evolving, and again, it fits well under Google's philosophy of innovation and simplification. And just how do we make it much simpler and easier for customers to adapt and scale easily? Google still remains the largest engineering contributor to Kubernetes, and it funds the infrastructure for Kubernetes development. Kubernetes is built and distributed on GKE, Google Kubernetes engine itself. So why do customers choose GKE? Again, how do we help customers to quickly set up and running? How do we make the management simpler and easier so that there is a very less learning curve? Now, how do we optimize workload, the right size workloads and right resources? How can we scale up based on the demand? How do we manage Black Friday, Cyber Monday? So all those challenges, right? So all those challenges are addressed by Google, and there are so many customer testimonies who are being benefited with GKE's scalability and simpler management capabilities. And of course, Kubernetes is open source based on the Kubernetes open source framework. So just a quick overview of what is managed Kubernetes. The left side you see do your own Kubernetes. That's when, as I mentioned, right, when enterprises adopt Kubernetes, there are a bunch of tasks falls on the hands of IT operators, and system and network engineers, like provisioning, control plane, and management, provisioning worker nodes, security, patching, monitoring, logging. I mean, how do we scale up and down? There's so much is falling on the operator's hand. But whereas managed Kubernetes uh, takes care of most of it, except provisioning the worker nodes and security and network configuration. So this is kind of, I would say, like default mode of GKE or Kubernetes. We call it as a standard mode. Um, so as I said, I mean, Google is evolving in its innovation on Kubernetes engine. So the next or the recent feature is called Autopilot Mode, in which even the worker nodes, provisioning and management, security, most of it are taken care by uh, Google itself, Google SRE, right? Google is known for SRE, site reliability engineering, as many of you may know. So this autopilot mode, in this autopilot mode, Kubernetes clusters, worker nodes, and even all the parts are managed and monitored with same Google SRE standards. So you can have two modes. I mean, it depends on the enterprise. In some enterprise who has Kubernetes experts, who has skill sets to manage Kubernetes, they can go for the standard mode. And I mean, the early adopters, I mean, who are new to Kubernetes, and then they just wanted to tip their toes, so they can always start with the autopilot, and as they get more used to it, as they improve their skill set and they get comfortable, they can switch to standard mode. And there are tools available to migrate from standard to autopilot mode. Again, as I said, it's keep evolving, and things are changing rapidly fast. So there are ways to go from one mode to the other. So it is optimized for production, as I said, by the Kubernetes experts. Um, it is to address the growing complexity in learning and using the right set of configurations for optimized for production, and also like inefficiency in managing resources and the need to understand the workload size, scale, and match to VM and node pool shapes. Um, Above all, I want to call out it's still Kubernetes. I mean, because other cloud providers kind of provide the same capability, but it can be it is a different product. In this, we are just extending the same GKE and make it autopilot so that it reduces the burden on the customers to adapt Kubernetes easily and make it more simpler, flexible, and secure. So that is the whole objective behind this GKE autopilot. Again, what is a day two operation? As I said, day two operation is once we have Kubernetes, how are we going to monitor? How are we going to update our master nodes? How are we going to update our worker nodes? I mean, how are we going to configure the networking security? I mean, how do I know, like, what is the what workload, what size of what pod size I should have, what node configuration I should have? All those are the challenges. So those things are completely addressed by this autopilot. So Google monitors the entire autopilot cluster, control plane, worker nodes, and core Kubernetes system components, ensuring your pods are always scheduled. By being optimized for workload, autopilot provisions the right resource your workload needs. So you don't need to figure out the node size or shape. And it obviously scale your workload to meet the demand, like Black Friday or Cyber Monday traffics are easily handled uh, by the capabilities it has without much expertise on managing Kubernetes. Other challenge as a part of day two operation is how do I upgrade my nodes? How do I keep my master the worker nodes with the right patches applied with security on top of the mind? So this different release channels, rapid, regular, and stable, help customer to choose themselves which one is right for them. So rapid is for the early adopters who wants to try out the latest features. It can be in the dev or test environments. And then for production and other critical workloads can benefit from regular and stable. So this helps customers to configure the updates, what do they need, and also you can schedule the time of the updates, right, over the weekends or 2 a.m. in the morning. Those things can be scheduled, and the type of the release can also be opted in during the configuration of this auto upgrade and release channels. As always, this autopilot is again optimized for production, right? I mean, our ultimate goal is to help the customer to take it easy and then adopt it gradually. So it is battle tested and hardened configuration, um, um, and also like it creates cluster based on create and manages clusters from Google SRE and engineering experience. These optimized configurations are ready for production, and then it help reduce the GKE learning curve and automatically provision cluster infrastructure based on workload, right? Based on the workload, you just basically inspect the size of the workload and what all you need, how much is it listen to the traffic, and based on it automatically or dynamically provisions the workload, and it helps customer to accelerate the time to production with minimal learning curve. As you all know, I mean, security is a top priority for most of the CIOs and all the enterprises. So we never compromise on security. It is secure by default with strong security emphasis, and Google takes full responsibility of the node and infrastructure security, including ongoing patches and updates, as we saw earlier. And it locked down the nodes, reducing the attack surface and any manual configuration errors. Um, so that way, like I mean, it relieves the pain of managing the security from the enterprise team and adopt it quickly. As we saw earlier, it basically the resource efficiency. How do we make it more efficient? Because when you do it manually, I mean, sometimes it's hard to choose. I mean, what kind of what size of the resource, how much memory, I mean, how much CPU I should allocate, right? Those challenges always there, and I mean, it differs between the expertise. So just to make it easy, so this dynamic resource optimization with bin packing, and also like optimize for scaling. It makes it much more resource efficient. Again, you pay only for your parts, not for your nodes. So that way it is much more efficient in terms of resource allocation, as well as scaling and monitoring and logging. So, and we just pay per part, not for the node. And above all, it is still the same GKE. As I said earlier, it's not a different new product. It's still same GKE with added capability of autopilot and enabling the customer to choose as per the comfort level. This is to cover the auto scaling capabilities. Again, this is part of standard mode as well as the autopilot mode. There are two ways of scaling. One is pod scaling, other one is a cluster scaling or a node scaling, we call it as. So this is in case of horizontal pod scaling. So it basically add more pods based on the different metrics. Like when my CPU utilization goes up 70%, add more pods, or my memory goes up. So based on different parameters, so it can be auto scale horizontally by adding more pods. The next one is the vertical pod autoscaler. So in this, I mean, vertical pod autoscaling, you can have different modes. Basically, it can go in a kind of a listening mode where it basically listens to the traffic and the usage patterns and come up with the recommendations of what kind of vertical pod can be added. I mean, how whether the CPU can be increased or decreased, the memory can be increased or decreased. Those recommendations will come based on that. The pod can be auto scaled vertically, or you can make it automatically, right? So there are different options in vertical pod auto scaling. Again, the other level is a cluster autoscaler or a node autoscaler, which adds nodes to your cluster when pods start to become unschedulable. So let's say, I mean, if the nodes are kind of running out of capacity, so we need to add new nodes. So that's when this cluster autoscaler comes in handy by adding new nodes to the cluster. Again, it comes in two forms. One is horizontal and other one is vertical. I mean, same as pod autoscaler. So these are some of the customer references. I mean, Shopify has been using GKE to scale up their clusters, and because Shopify's Black Friday and Cyber Monday traffic is huge, and they are able to scale up easily using GKE clusters. And also, like some of the major retailers are utilizing GKE to scale up the clusters. I mean, some of the prominent ones are like eBay, Lyft. I mean, they are leveraging GKE in a larger scale. Again, this is kind of a slight kind of comparison with other options. So GKE with GKE is able to provide nodes up to 15,000, right, which is 15x and 5x compared to other vendors available in the market. And some of the references is like Bayer Crop is utilizing this to do 15 billion genotypes per hour, which are the prominent ones to call out. And even Twitter is utilizing GKE to provision their Mesos and Aurora mega clusters. Again, GKE won't be complete without supporting Windows. And many of our customers have packaged applications and homegrown applications running on Windows. So Windows is very much supported in GKE and coming soon to Anthos, which I will cover in the following slide, our multi-cloud platform. And basically, this Windows containers can run, these clusters can run in parallel with Linux nodes. And also, like, this can leverage all the capabilities of GKE, just like any other Linux GKE cluster. So this is a kind of a quick overview of how when we modernize an application from so a developer and a service operator or SRE, or you can even call it as a DevOps, and then infrastructure operator or a infrastructure engineer. So the Knative is again open source serverless platform on Kubernetes, containers-based Kubernetes, which can be very handy for developers without worrying about the infrastructure. So it's quick to start, and they can just focus on the application development rather than infrastructure and other monitoring or managing and security perspective. They can just focus on their application level task. And Anthos service mesh, I mean, which can be used to secure, manage, and monitor microservices on Kubernetes. And again, as an infrastructure operator, they can just manage the Kubernetes and GKE platform. As I mentioned earlier, this is the Cloud Run is Google's serverless engine or a platform, I would say. Cloud Run, a hosted Knative solution that lets you run your serverless application without worrying about the infrastructure. And then it comes in two flavors. One is fully managed, serverless. We just pay for what you use. No cluster to manage. I mean, if a developer wants to run a quick batch job and test it, they can just run it and then quickly deploy in cloud and test it. And after that, they want to containerize, they can just move that to Cloud Run on GKE, which can containerize and push the image to the GCR, Google Cloud Container Registry. And then the CI/CD can basically pull that and build the image and deploy it to GKE. So that way, Cloud Run can be leveraged very well for a batch job and also for a web app. So it's basically a PaaS, platform as a service offering, which runs on GKE as a container. Anthos is a Kubernetes-based platform that runs everywhere you do with a cloud-backed control plane for centralized management. As I said, it's an extension of GKE. I mean, it was introduced in 2019. So this is to address. I mean, we want customer to choose. I mean, to choose their own option. So I mean, some of the services are available in certain clouds, or even can be leveraged. Leveraging the on-premise resources would be better than moving to a specific cloud. So this helps customers. Anthos helps customer to manage workloads in across the clouds, on-premise, or nowadays with evolution of 5G and AR VR capabilities. I mean, having edge workloads are inevitable. I mean, so Anthos helps to even manage edge workloads, private clusters, multi-cloud cluster, on-premise cluster, and also Google Cloud clusters. As I said, Anthos is a single pane of glass across Google Cloud and on-premise and other clouds. And it is, I mean, one of the other challenge the enterprise face today is, I mean, how do I manage a disparate system? I mean, we have services running in different clouds, on-premise. How do I train my team? How can they switch? I mean, do I need to develop in multiple places? I mean, how do I manage things differently, right? So that's where Anthos is a key to have a unified single pane of glass management across without any change in the way you develop and way you deploy, so that it can go across and help the operators and infrastructure engineers to easily manage from a single dashboard. So as I said, Anthos, it's run on top of the Kubernetes distribution. It basically virtualizes VM and infrastructure. It is secure, flexible, simple, just again, falling under the same Google's innovation theme. It supports hybrid multi-cloud edge, and also there are there are ways to seamlessly migrate the workloads from one place to the other without any major outage. So, I mean, one of the challenges, how do I convert my VMs, right? I mean, most of the enterprises have VMs running in their on-premise or colos. How do I transform this to containers, and how can I modernize it? I mean, what is the path to get there? So that's where this kind of tools, which can migrate a VM into container directly, it significantly reduces cost, time, labor compared to upgrading manually, right? So which involves a lot of efforts, and it needs expertise. It's a low-touch migration, so that way, like, you can just migrate a VM to container and run in GKE with minimal downtime. And again, it doesn't need a deep knowledge, and it just, most of them are configuration, and then it is backed up by Google's SRE and then monitoring and other logging services, which takes care of this with much minimal downtime. And it helps organization to modernize from monolith to microservices, and moving to Kubernetes. Of course, again, we all know, like, I mean, Google's prominent strength is AI, ML, and data. So this Kubeflow is the basically Kubernetes platform to develop, deploy, and manage scalable end-to-end machine learning workloads. So that this ML workloads can be containerized and stored it in the registry, which can be pulled and deployed in this Kubernetes platform as a Kubeflow. And the advantage is it can integrate with other Google's pre-built, fully trained models like speech-to-text, OCR, and other machine learning capabilities. It has a tight integration with that, so this can leverage those capabilities. And now Google has a comprehensive AI platform called Vertex AI, which offers all the AI/ML capabilities as a single platform with the integration to GKE and other Google services. So in summary, I mean, this is what I would like to emphasize here is it's enterprise ready. So GKE makes the daunting task of adopting and managing Kubernetes easy and simplified for IT leaders, technical managers, and developers. It takes care of hybrid networking, auto repair, security, and compliance. From the developer perspective, it is fast and consistent builds and open source portability, and it's fully managed. So those are the key advantages of GKE and Anthos. Again, just a continuation. It is open source. It automates security. Again, it brings AI/ML services close to your GKE clusters, and above all, it reduces TCO, and it helps enterprises to deliver faster and increase their agility. And you can manage applications anywhere in Google Cloud or other clouds and on premises. So that's a wrap. I mean, if you have any questions, you can ask now, or reach out to Ron, or reach out to me. So we are happy to help. I would hand over to Ron now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Vijay. The key takeaways as I was listening to this were twofold. First, you get a sense of the power of the Google Cloud Platform that's reflected in its support for 9 business units that have to service 1 billion users each, from Gmail to Android, etc. So they've got a huge internal demand, and that capabilities of supporting those 9 business units translates into fantastic services available for external customers.